My name is Sister Carol Barnes. I'm a Sister of Charity of New York, and I am delighted to share with you a bit of the early history of the New York Foundling, a history that is closely aligned with that of the Sisters of Charity. By 1869, the city had grown in both size and complexity. A large immigrant population, many from Ireland, poured into the city. Most were poor and lacked the support of extended family ties. Their ability to support a newborn child was limited, and as a result, many infants were abandoned in the streets. Clearly a tragic situation, for there were no city services available to support the families or to care for the children. The sisters at St. Peter's Parochial School in Lower Manhattan became aware of this challenge, and its principal, Sister Mary Irene Fitzgibbon, was deeply moved to respond to this new and pressing need. With the approval and support of the Mother General and the local diocese, Sister Irene leased a brownstone on East 12th Street off Fifth Avenue. The Mother General gave her a symbolic gift of $5 to begin the project. On October 11th, Sister Irene and 3 other sisters moved into the brownstone. They had already decided that no babies would be accepted until the new year. But on that first day, in the early evening, the sisters heard a faint cry. Opening the door, they saw on the stoop a newborn infant wrapped in a blanket. When they opened the blanket, they saw a note which read, "Her name is Sarah H." Sarah was our first foundling. Within the first year, a woman appeared at the door with her baby, and rather than give the child up, asked to be admitted with the child. This became a practice and was the forerunner of the Foundlings Maternity Shelter and Mother-Child Program. But the babies continued to arrive, and by 1872, 2,500 babies had been placed. Sister Irene believed that babies should not be raised in an institutional setting. She began the placement of infants with families in the neighborhood and expanded the area of placement to include the metropolitan New York area, and later on to include homes in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and ultimately in the Midwest and Western states. The children traveled by rail in what was generally called the baby train.
Hello from the National Orphan Train Complex. My name is Shaylee George, and I'm the curator here in Concordia, Kansas. The New York Foundling was one of at least 30 placing out organizations of the orphan train movement. Between 1854 to 1929, over 250,000 orphaned, abandoned, and homeless children were placed out across the United States and 10 known countries. This 75-year movement was one of the largest social reform relocation efforts in our nation's history, and the beginning of documented foster care in America. The orphan train movement began and continued due to a number of social and economic reasons: the rapid growth of New York and other U.S. cities, the lack of resources for those in need, unsafe housing and work environments, economic inequality, wars, and diseases would all lead to children and families in need of aid. By the mid-1800s, outdoor relief had been pushed aside in most cities in favor of indoor relief in the form of alms and poorhouses, work farms, orphanages, and asylums. These options left children to be institutionally raised with a basic education but no real-world experience and no support system once they aged out. With poorhouses, orphanages, and jails seeing an influx of children, combined with a near 30,000 children living on the street, something different had to be done. The first company of children sent west was in 1854 by the Children's Aid Society of New York in partnership with the New York Juvenile Asylum. The journey took 2 boats and 2 trains to reach Dowagiac, Michigan. 36 children were placed in homes in and around Dowagiac, while 10 others were placed out in Iowa City, Iowa. The Children's Aid Society was founded by Reverend Charles Loring Brace in 1853. The Society's placing out method involved pre-selecting a community and utilizing placing out agents and a committee made up of local citizens to help select homes for their children. Agents would then check up on the children in their care at least yearly until they aged out of the program. The Children's Aid Society placed out children of all ages, from infants to 22-year-olds. In 1874, they expanded their immigration department and began facilitating travel for full families to communities out west where they had family or job opportunities. Through the Children's Aid Society annual reports, we know that there were at least 47 nationalities placed out on the orphan train, the top 3 being American-born, Irish, and German. The New York Foundling Hospital was founded in October 1869 by Sister Mary Irene Fitzgibbons and the Sisters of Charity. The organization began in a small brownstone. On the sisters' very first night in their new home, an infant girl was left on their doorstep. The Foundlings soon outgrew their first and second brownstone buildings and built a much larger facility on the Upper East Side. The Foundling offered mothers, fathers, and guardians a desperately needed anonymous option to place their child in an orphanage or up for adoption. And their women and children's hospitals would save countless lives, filling a need for specialty medicine that was not prioritized by others at the time. The Foundling utilized a pre-placement method to find families for the children in their care, contacting parishes and using the local priests to screen applicants. Interested Catholic families would fill out applications that could specify the hair color, eye color, age, and gender of the child they would like to add to their family, matching the child's features to their own. The Foundling usually placed children under a year old to 5 years. Because the children were pre-placed, larger groups of children could be taken at one time. Incredibly well-planned trips with 50 to over 100 children would travel to multiple cities in 2 to 3 states and deliver children to their new families quickly and efficiently. Children wore identifying information and later numbers to ensure they were placed with the family who had requested them. The children would then be checked up on at least yearly by the Foundling's agents until they were of age or formally adopted. In the complex's Orphan Train Museum, we have a room dedicated to the New York Foundling Hospital. It features artifacts, personal stories of foundlings, and the history of the foundling. One of our favorite foundling stories is that of Anne Harrison, but I'll let her tell her story in her own words.
My name's Anne Harrison. I rode the orphan trains when I was 2.5 years old, in 1911. I'd always taken for granted that I was a child of John Joseph and Anna Bruley of Colorado Springs, Colorado. When I was 27 and in New York City, I discovered I was adopted. I found I had been one of 5 children who had been sent by train to couples of St. Mary's Catholic Church. After many years of research, I found that my birth name was Mabel Rubin. I was delivered by the American poet William Carlos Williams, also a pediatrician at the New York Infants Asylum. My mother's name was Jenny Rubin. She was born in Russia, gave birth to me at age 19. My father's name was Mo Cohen. He was born in New York City and was 21 when I was born. Whereas my birth parents were Jewish, I was reared a Catholic.
Over 30 statues have been placed throughout our community to tell the stories of orphan train riders. Our most visited is Father Paul Fangman, who stands in front of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church. Father Paul was placed out by the Foundling in 1923 at 9 months old in Rayville, Nebraska. In 1949, he was ordained and served as a priest in the Omaha Diocese for 60 years. His parishioners and fellow priests consistently stop in to say hello and remember their friend and favorite priest. One of my favorite stories is of Miriam Malford Rowering Zitter. Shortly after her birth in 1906, Miriam was placed in the Foundling. At 19 months, she was placed with Herman and Elizabeth Roering. Elizabeth had been visited by the family's priest to see if their family was interested in requesting a child. The Rorings had 12 children, 1 daughter, the eldest, and 11 sons. Elizabeth jumped at the chance to have another little girl and filled out the paperwork. She then went to tell her husband that they were going to have another little girl. Herman was understandably a bit confused, but took it all in stride. When their new little girl arrived, she was quickly spoiled and doted on. Miriam married and had 8 children, 64 grandchildren, and now has over 220 direct descendants. A statue honoring her was sponsored by those descendants in 2016. The orphan train riders went on to establish families of their own. They became doctors, lawyers, teachers, servicemen and women, government officials, and helped develop America. Without the foresight of organizations like the Foundling, thousands of children would not have been saved, and our country would not be the same. The legacies of the orphan train riders and the organizations that cared for them is hard to calculate or even fathom. So I will leave you with the words written by one of Miriam Zitter's grandchildren for her eulogy. To Grandma, I remember you telling me you haven't accomplished much lately. And Grandma, I would look at you and say, look around. You started a dynasty of love. You made the world a better place by raising your children with love. This enabled them to love their children, and those same children, your grandchildren, were able to love their children, and it keeps going. You started something that can't be stopped, and it's the most important thing anyone can give to this world. You accomplished more than any human being I know. God will reward you with a place in heaven not many others will ever know. A place for very special, loving people. Grandma, I miss you very much, and so do hundreds of others you gave your love to. Thank you for being a part of our lives. Today, there are up to 40 million orphan train descendants living in America. To learn more about the orphan train movement or your orphan train rider ancestor, please visit orphantraindepot.org or reach out to our research center. And congratulations to the Foundling on their 151st year of outstanding service.
My grandfather entered this world in 1896 under the name of Joseph Aner. He likely was given this name so that his origins would be very difficult to trace. He came to the Foundling home within days of his birth. He was born to a single mother with limited resources. The sisters and other staff of the Foundling raised him until the age of 5, when he was placed on an orphan train and traveled to central Missouri. Upon arrival there, he was taken in by the Markway family of the rural farming community of Wardsville, Missouri. Grandpa's life was not easy. He was haunted by questions of where he came from and how he was left at an orphanage. He was traumatized as a young adult by his experiences in World War I. Later, he started a successful business, but lost everything in the Great Depression. He was fortunate, though, to marry a woman that he adored and to have a family of his own. Despite the many traumas Grandpa experienced, all his grandchildren remember him as loving, kind, and lighthearted. How did he turn out to be such a wonderful man? I believe part of the answer is the care that he received at the Foundling. It's easy to think about the kids as statistics, all those kids who crossed the threshold of the Foundling. for there were over 2,000 of them living there when my grandfather arrived. But each one of those kids represented so much more. They represented thousands of people in future generations. Joseph Ayner's grandchildren include teachers, a nun, an engineer, business people, and me, a psychologist who has worked with abused and neglected children. Whatever you give to the foundling, be it your time, your ideas, or your financial support, you are investing in people. You are investing in the future. I am thankful to all those who helped my grandfather over 120 years ago. I'm grateful to those who believed that every child deserves to be loved and every child deserves an opportunity.
My name is Nicole. I was adopted through the New York Foundling as an infant in 1980 by two loving parents from the island of Jamaica. I always had questions about my ethnic background and health information. This information was not available to me, so when I got to college, I began to research the history of Rockland County, New York to find out about the cultural ethnicities that reside there. Unfortunately, I still could not find out much information. No DNA testing kits had been released at that time. Finally, at age 39, I went to the New York Foundling Adoption Reunion in Manhattan with my family, and it was suggested that I try two other DNA testing kits. These kits actually worked. Along with the release of my pre-adoption birth certificate, the DNA testing revealed my biological family on both sides in the state of New York and also northern New Jersey. I also found out one side of my family is African American, the other side was Native American from a tribe that's state recognized in New York and New Jersey, and they were multiracial. I'm thankful for this information to pass along to my biological children, along with health information that has been released. Having this information has given me closure. I am thankful to pass this on to my children, and I hope to help contribute to the New York Foundling's great cause of placing other children for adoption so that they can have a great life. I do feel a sense of closure in having this information, and also a closer connection with my home state of New York because of the cultural significance and history. Thank you.
I've done research on my mother, who was an orphan train rider in 1914, placed at the New York Foundling in 1912, and I do have the records of her being placed there by her mother at 10 days old as she was a sick child. And just tell you a little bit about her and her life. She had a beautiful home. She had a father that loved her, a mother who tried to teach her, but her father said she didn't have to do that. So that's why I'm here, just to follow up, hear other people's stories, get some hints, some leads on another direction, if I can. And I just want to show, can I just show these pictures? This is my mom. One is 2, one is 4, and she was so cute.
Hello, my name is Ellen Corcoran Hart, and I'm the author of this book, 4,000 Generations, The Untold Story of an Orphan Train Rider. That orphan train rider was my dad, who was born in 1913 to an unwed Irish girl at the New York Foundling Hospital in New York. My book tells the story of his life as a child in the Foundling, and how at age 6, in 1919, the sisters at the Foundling put him on the orphan train to Grand Forks, North Dakota, when a married couple requested him for adoption. He met my mother in later years, who had also been an orphan of sorts. I am grateful to the New York Foundling for sending me my dad's information so I could write this book for my children and grandchildren.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the whole family story because it was pretty much right after birth. I was about 3 weeks old, okay? maybe a little more, but not much. It was the New Year's between New Year's Eve, 47 to 48. So it was a while back. And we were living at 3rd Avenue and 50th Street, right down from a few blocks from St. Pat's yesterday. The neighborhood obviously was different. More than likely, my father was down having a few New Year's Eve, and my mother said, I'm gonna go down and get him, you know, but she stayed. So 4 o'clock in the morning, they got arrested. There was a fight in the street, they got arrested, and I can almost see my mother saying to the cop, well, you can't arrest me because my baby's up there. And the cop going, lady, what, your baby's up there? Get in the car. The reason I found, well, the reason I found all this out is later on in, 20 plus years ago, I started to, what's going on. I knew about the family. I knew that was part of my history, but never in depth. So I contacted the family. In fact, there was one of the sisters, she's passed away, but she was retired then. She did this stuff, they said, so that's where I got all the information about the incident with the rest. Of course, the cops' names are all blacked out, and one of the things that their parents were no strangers to the police type of thing. I feel a very lucky guy, and I don't know, and I think a lot of things, the family had to do with that. I have 2 kids. I was previously married, and my 2 kids. Everybody seems fine, seems okay, and I've had a good life. But I really think that, they were there when I needed them.
Wow, what an incredible collection of stories from some of the foundling's adoptees and descendants. I'm Estelle McIntosh, the Director of Adoption and Legal Services at the Foundling. I'm thrilled to be joining you tonight as we kick off our series of mini events for Full Facts. Thank you all for joining us as we pay tribute to those who have helped create a long-lasting legacy in our community. For more than 150 years, the organization has served as a beacon of hope and stability. Last year was no exception. As we celebrated our 150th anniversary, expanded many of our programs, and witnessed thousands of successes among the children, adults, and families who participate in our programs. This was a particularly meaningful year for the Foundling, as 69 children were adopted in 2019, and 300 children were placed in permanent homes with family and close kin, a growing trend in the world of foster care. We also continued the process of digitizing our adoption records and provided reports and information to many of our adoptees and adoptee descendants, not to mention the exciting law change that made it possible for New York adoptees to obtain their original birth certificates from the state. You are all an essential part of the Foundlings family, and it has been great to have you here with us tonight. If you didn't have a chance to donate, please visit the Foundlings website at the link below. Every dollar makes a difference. And be sure to mark your calendars for our schedule of events throughout the month of October. Our next event is a family-friendly cooking event on October the 16th. Thank you and have a great night.